the Hollow Prince's throne. Briarvex had always been warned never to cross the threshold of the ruined castle. But the night she did, the air cracked with unseen energy. The torches lit themselves. The dust settled, and then a voice, rich and ancient, curled against her skin. "You woke me," he murmured, stepping into the light, golden eyes gleaming. "And now, you will never wake alone." Chapter 1. The Whispers of Blackwood Manor. The wind howled a mournful dirge through the skeletal branches of the ancient oaks surrounding Blackwood Manor, a sound Briarvex had grown accustomed to over her 62 years. It was a sound that mirrored the constant ache in her heart, a hollow space left by her late husband, Thomas. He'd been gone 5 years, yet the manor still echoed with his laughter, his scent-pipe tobacco and old books clinging to the worn velvet drapes and the leather-bound volumes lining the library walls. Briar wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, the chill seeping deeper than the November air. It was a bone-deep coldness, a loneliness that had settled in her marrow. She tried to fill the void gardening, painting, even a disastrous attempt at pottery, but nothing seemed to stick. The vibrant colors of her life had faded to a muted gray, leaving her feeling like a ghost haunting her own home. Blackwood Manor itself seemed to mourn with her. The once pristine gardens were overgrown, the roses choked by weeds. The paint on the grand Victorian facade peeled like sunburnt skin, revealing the weathered wood beneath. It was a reflection of her own neglect, a physical manifestation of her inner decay. Her only constant companion was Mrs. Hawthorne, the housekeeper, a stout, no-nonsense woman who had been with the Vex family for decades. Mrs. Hawthorne bustled about, clucking like a mother hen, but even her presence couldn't fully dispel the oppressive silence. Tonight, however, the silence was different. It wasn't the usual, heavy blanket of emptiness. It was a pregnant silence, a held breath before a storm. Briar felt it in the prickling of her skin, the uneasy flutter in her chest. She dismissed it as nerves, the lingering effects of the unsettling dream she'd had the night before, a dream of shadowed figures and a ruined castle bathed in an unnatural, golden light. "Another cup of chamomile, Mrs. Vex?" Mrs. Hawthorne's voice startled her. Briar blinked, shaking off the remnants of the dream. "Yes, thank you, Mrs. Hawthorne. And perhaps a bit stronger tonight, if you please." Mrs. Hawthorne eyed her with concern. "You've been looking pale lately, Mrs. Vex. Perhaps a bit of fresh air would do you good. Though, of course, not near that place." Briar knew exactly what that place referred to. Eldoria Castle, a crumbling ruin perched atop the cliffs overlooking the sea, just beyond the boundaries of Blackwood Manor's property. Local legend claimed it was cursed, haunted by the restless spirit of a long-dead prince. The villagers of Oakhaven, the small town nestled at the foot of the cliffs, whispered tales of strange lights and eerie sounds emanating from the ruins, particularly on nights like this, when the wind howled and the moon hid behind a veil of storm clouds. Briar had always dismissed the stories as folklore, the product of overactive imaginations. Thomas, a practical man of science, had scoffed at them. Yet, ever since her dream, a strange unease had settled over her, a feeling that the line between reality and legend was blurring. She sipped the tea, the warmth spreading through her, but failing to reach the icy core of her apprehension. "I think I'll take a walk in the library," she said, rising from her chair. "Perhaps a good book will help me sleep." The library was her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in other worlds, escape the confines of her grief. The scent of old paper and leather was comforting, familiar. She ran her fingers along the spines of the books, her gaze drawn to a particular volume, a slim, leather-bound book with a silver clasp, a book of local legends and folklore that Thomas had given her years ago. She'd never paid much attention to it before, dismissing it as frivolous, but tonight it called to her. She opened the book, the pages brittle and yellowed with age. The first chapter detailed the legend of Eldoria Castle and its tragic prince, Alaric. According to the tale, Alaric was a powerful sorcerer, betrayed by his lover and cursed to an eternal, restless slumber within the castle walls. Only a woman of pure heart, a woman who had known true love and true loss, could break the curse. Briar scoffed, a faint smile touching her lips. Pure heart? True loss? I suppose I qualify on the second count, at least. She continued reading, drawn in by the lyrical prose and the tragic romance of the tale. As she read, the wind outside intensified, rattling the windows and whistling through the cracks in the old house. The library lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. A sudden, sharp gust of wind slammed one of the windows open, sending a flurry of dead leaves swirling into the room. Briar jumped, dropping the book. As she bent to retrieve it, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. A small, silver ring, intricately carved with the image of a wolf's head, lay on the floor, gleaming faintly in the dim light. It wasn't hers. She'd never seen it before. She picked it up, the metal cold against her skin. As she held it, a strange sensation washed over her, a tingling warmth, a feeling of connection, of recognition. It was as if the ring was humming with a faint, almost imperceptible energy. Suddenly, the library doors creaked open, and Mrs. Hawthorne stood in the doorway, her face pale with alarm. Mrs. Vex, did you hear that noise? It sounded like something breaking. Briar looked up, her heart pounding. She could hear it too, a faint, rhythmic thudding coming from the direction of the woods, the direction of Aldoria Castle. A shiver ran down her spine. It was just the wind, she told herself. Just the storm. But deep down, a primal fear, ancient and instinctive, whispered a different truth. Something had changed. Something had awakened. And it was calling to her. Chapter 2. The Unveiling of Forgotten Echoes. The thudding grew louder, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of Blackwood Manor. Briar clutched the silver ring tighter, its strange warmth a small comfort against the growing dread that coiled in her stomach. Mrs. Hawthorne, her usually unflappable composure shattered, wrung her hands. It's coming from the woods, Mrs. Vex, she whispered, her voice trembling. From the direction of the castle. Briar knew she should stay inside, lock the doors, and wait for the storm to pass. It was the sensible thing to do, the safe thing to do. But an irresistible force, a pull she couldn't explain, drew her towards the woods, towards the source of the unsettling sound. It was as if the ring in her hand was a compass, its needle pointing inexorably towards Aldoria Castle. I'm going to take a look, Briar said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in her hands. No, Mrs. Vex. You mustn't, Mrs. Hawthorne cried, reaching out to stop her. It's dangerous. The stories Briar gently pulled her hand away. I'll be careful, Mrs. Hawthorne. I just need to see. She didn't know what she needed to see, but she knew she couldn't ignore the insistent call, the feeling that something profound, something life-altering, awaited her in the storm-tossed woods. She grabbed a heavy woolen cloak from the hall stand and stepped out into the night. The wind whipped at her face, stinging her eyes and tearing at her hair. Rain lashed down, soaking her to the bone within seconds. The path leading towards the woods was barely visible, the darkness broken only by the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the twisted branches of the trees, making them look like grasping claws. The thudding sound grew louder with each step, now accompanied by a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down her spine. It wasn't the sound of any animal she knew. It was something else. Something primal, something ancient. As she neared the edge of the woods, she saw it. A flickering, golden light emanating from the ruins of Aldoria Castle. It pulsed in time with the thudding sound, casting an eerie glow on the surrounding trees. The sight was both terrifying and mesmerizing, a beacon in the storm. Briar hesitated at the edge of the woods, her fear warring with an overwhelming curiosity. She thought of Thomas, his rational mind, his skepticism. He would have told her to turn back, to dismiss it all as a trick of the light, a figment of her grief-stricken imagination. But Thomas was gone, and she was alone, facing something she couldn't explain, something that defied logic and reason. She took a deep breath, the scent of rain and wet earth filling her lungs, and stepped into the woods. The trees closed in around her, their branches forming a dark canopy overhead, shutting out the stormy sky. The air grew heavy, thick with an almost palpable energy. She felt a strange tingling sensation, as if she were walking through a charged field. The path to the castle was overgrown, the stones slippery with moss and rain. She stumbled several times, her hands scraped and bleeding, but she pressed on, driven by an unseen force. The growling grew louder, closer, and she could now hear the distinct sound of heavy footsteps, the snapping of twigs underfoot. Finally, she reached the crumbling walls of Eldoria Castle. The golden light spilled from a large, arched opening, revealing a vast, ruined courtyard. In the center of the courtyard, a figure stood silhouetted against the light. It was tall and imposing, its form shifting and flickering, as if it were made of shadows and smoke. As Briar watched, the figure slowly began to solidify, taking on a more defined shape. It was a man, or rather, something that looked like a man. He was clad in what appeared to be ancient armor, his face hidden by a shadowed helm. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They glowed with the same unearthly, golden light that emanated from the castle, piercing the darkness like twin beacons. He turned his head, his gaze locking onto hers. Briar felt a jolt of pure, primal fear, but she couldn't look away. She was rooted to the spot, trapped in his gaze, as if he were holding her captive with the sheer force of his will. He took a step towards her, and the growling intensified, morphing into a deep, resonant voice that seemed to vibrate in her very bones. "You came," he said. His voice was a low rumble, laced with an ancient sorrow and a hint of something else. Something dangerous. Something alluring. Briar's mind raced. This was impossible. This was madness. She was hallucinating, dreaming, lost in a world of grief and fantasy. Yet, the cold rain on her skin, the sharp stones beneath her feet, the intense, undeniable presence of the figure before her, it all felt undeniably real. She opened her mouth to speak, to scream, to demand an explanation, but no sound came out. She was paralyzed by fear, by the sheer overwhelming power that emanated from him. He took another step, closing the distance between them. The golden light illuminated his face, revealing features that were both strikingly handsome and strangely unsettling. His skin was pale, almost translucent, his cheekbones high and sharp, his jaw strong and defined. His hair, the color of raven's wings, fell to his shoulders in thick waves. He reached out a hand, his fingers long and slender, tipped with claws that glinted in the light. Briar flinched, expecting pain, expecting to be ripped apart. But instead, his touch was surprisingly gentle. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his fingertips lingering on her cheek. "You feel it, don't you?" he murmured, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. The pull, the connection, the awakening. His touch sent a shiver through her, a strange mixture of fear and something else. Something she hadn't felt in years. A spark of life, a flicker of desire. It was a feeling she thought she'd buried with Thomas, a feeling she'd believed was lost forever. But there were now stirrings within her. He lowered his hand, his golden eyes searching hers, as if looking for something, some sign, some answer. Who are you?" Briar finally managed to whisper, her voice hoarse and trembling. A faint smile touched his lips, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I am Alaric," he said, "and I have been waiting for you for a very, very long time." He paused, his gaze sweeping over her, a mixture of scrutiny and something akin to hope in their golden depths. The wind seemed to hush around them, as if holding its breath, waiting. Chapter 3. Across the Threshold of Shadows. Alaric. The name echoed in Briar's mind, resonating with the legends she had read just hours before. The Cursed Prince. The Sleeping Sorcerer. It was impossible, preposterous, yet here he stood, flesh and something else, before her. The reality of it crashed against her like the waves against the cliffs below. "Waiting for me?" Briar's voice was barely a whisper, lost in the renewed howling of the wind. The rain continued to fall, plastering her cloak to her body, chilling her to the bone, yet she felt a strange warmth emanating from Alaric, a heat that seemed to defy the storm. He nodded, his golden eyes never leaving hers. For centuries, I have slept, trapped between worlds, bound by a curse woven from betrayal and despair. Only a woman of your kind could awaken me. His words echoed the folklore, the tales she had dismissed as fanciful stories. But the intensity in his gaze, the raw power that radiated from him, made it impossible to deny the truth. She had awakened him. The silver ring, still clutched tightly in her hand, throbbed with a faint, rhythmic pulse, a confirmation of the connection between them. My kind? Briar questioned, her mind struggling to grasp the enormity of what was happening. She was a widow, a woman living a quiet, solitary life, her days filled with mundane routines and the lingering ache of loss. What could he possibly mean? Alaric gestured towards the ruined castle, the golden light spilling from its broken walls. Come, he said, his voice a low command. There is much to explain, much you need to understand. He turned and walked towards the arched opening, his movements fluid and graceful, despite the heavy armor he wore. Briar hesitated, her instinct screaming at her to run, to flee back to the safety of Blackwood Manor. But the pull, the undeniable connection she felt to him, to the ring, to this ancient, cursed place, was too strong to resist. She took a tentative step, then another, following him into the shadows of Eldoria Castle. The air inside was different, warmer, drier, and charged with a palpable energy that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. The thudding sound she had heard earlier had ceased, replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the crackling of the unseen energy that seemed to illuminate the castle. The courtyard was vast and desolate, the stones cracked and broken, the remnants of what must have been a magnificent structure. Faded tapestries hung from the walls, depicting scenes of battles and hunts, of kings and queens, their colors muted by time and decay. Briar could almost hear the echoes of the past, the whispers of forgotten lives, the ghosts of those who had once walked these halls. Alaric led her through a series of crumbling archways and down a long, winding staircase, the air growing colder and damper with each step. The golden light followed them, illuminating their path, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Finally, they reached a large, circular chamber. The walls were lined with shelves filled with ancient books and scrolls, their pages brittle and yellowed with age. In the center of the chamber stood a massive stone table, covered in strange symbols and diagrams. A single, flickering torch burned in a sconce on the wall, casting a dim, flickering light. Alaric turned to face her, his golden eyes glowing in the darkness. "This was my sanctuary," he said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "My place of power. And now it is yours as well." Briar looked around the chamber, her mind reeling. She felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if she had been here before, in a dream, in a past life. The symbols on the table seemed to tug at her memory, whispering forgotten secrets. I don't understand," she stammered, her voice echoing her confusion. "Why me? What do you want from me?" Alaric stepped closer, his gaze intense. "The curse that binds me can only be broken by a woman who has known both great love and great loss. A woman whose heart is strong enough to withstand the darkness, yet open enough to embrace the light. A woman like you." He reached out and gently took her hand, the one holding the silver ring. His touch sent a jolt of energy through her, a wave of warmth that spread through her entire body. "The ring," he said, his voice a low murmur. "It is a key. A conduit. It connects us, binds us together. It is a symbol of our shared destiny." Briar looked down at the ring, the wolf's head gleaming in the torchlight. She had found it by chance, a seemingly random occurrence. But now she realized that it was no accident. It was fate. It was magic. "But I'm just an ordinary woman," she protested, her voice filled with doubt. "I'm not strong. I'm not special." Alaric smiled. A sad, wistful smile. "You are more than you know, Briar Vex. You possess a power you have yet to understand, a power that has been dormant within you, waiting to be awakened. And I am here to help you unlock it. He released her hand, but the connection remained, a tangible link between them. He gestured towards the stone table, the symbols glowing faintly in the light. The curse that binds me is ancient and powerful, he explained. It was woven by a sorceress, a woman I once loved, a woman who betrayed me for power. She trapped my soul within this castle, condemned me to an eternal slumber, a half-life between worlds. He paused, his gaze turning inward, as if reliving the pain of his betrayal. But the curse has a weakness, a loophole, a chance for redemption. And that chance is you. His hand moved almost on its own accord, and it brushed softly against the exposed skin of her forearm, sending a completely unexpected shockwave of raw, intense energy crashing over her. The air around them crackled, for a brief moment, charged, and Briar found it hard to breathe. Chapter 4. The scent of embers and rain. The shock of Alaric's touch lingered, a tingling warmth that spread through Briar's veins, chasing away the chill of the ancient chamber. She stared at her arm, at the spot where his fingers had brushed her skin, as if expecting to see a mark, a visible sign of the energy that had surged through her. It was a sensation unlike anything she had ever experienced, a potent mixture of fear and exhilaration. Alaric watched her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of concern and something else. Something that looked like fascination. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that echoed in the silence. Briar nodded, her throat still tight, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, I think so." "Well, what was that?" He withdrew his hand, a shadow of regret crossing his face. "The connection," he explained. "The bond between us. It is stronger than I anticipated. The ring amplifies it, but even without it, there is a resonance." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You're sensitive, Briar Vex. You have a natural affinity for the unseen world, for magic. It is why you were drawn to the castle, why you could hear the call, why you were able to awaken me." Briar shook her head, trying to make sense of his words. Magic? She was a practical woman, a woman of science, like Thomas. She believed in what she could see, what she could touch, what she could understand. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The ring, the castle, Alaric himself, they were all proof that the world was far stranger, far more magical than she had ever imagined. I don't know anything about magic," she stammered. "I'm just an ordinary woman." Alaric smiled, a gentle, encouraging smile. "There is no such thing as an ordinary woman, Briar. Especially not you. You have a strength within you, a resilience, that has allowed you to survive great loss. And that strength, it is a form of magic in itself." He gestured towards the stone table, the strange symbols glowing faintly in the torchlight. "These are the runes of the old tongue," he explained. "The language of magic. They hold the key to breaking the curse, to freeing me from this half-life." Briar looked at the runes, her eyes tracing their intricate patterns. They seemed to hum with a faint energy, whispering secrets she couldn't quite decipher. She felt a strange pull towards them, a sense of familiarity, as if she had seen them before, in a dream, in a forgotten memory. Can you teach me?" she asked, the words surprising even herself. She had never considered herself a student, a learner, not after all these years. But the prospect of unlocking this hidden power, of understanding the mysteries of this ancient world, filled her with a sense of purpose, a spark of excitement she hadn't felt in years. Alaric's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Then he smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, transforming his features, making him look almost human. "I would be honored," he said, his voice filled with a warmth that sent a shiver down her spine. "But it will not be easy. The path of magic is fraught with danger, with challenges. Are you sure you are ready for this?" Briar hesitated, her fear warring with her newfound curiosity. She thought of Thomas, of the quiet, predictable life they had shared. She thought of the emptiness she had felt since his death, the feeling of being lost, adrift. And then she thought of Alaric, of the strange, exhilarating energy that surged through her when he touched her, of the promise of something more, something extraordinary. She took a deep breath, the scent of embers and rain filling her lungs. The embers, she realized, were coming from Alaric. He smelled faintly of smoke and fire, a scent that was both unsettling and strangely alluring. The rain, of course, was the storm that still raged outside, a reminder of the world she had left behind. "I'm not sure," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I need to try. I need to find out who I am, what I'm capable of." Alaric nodded, his golden eyes filled with understanding. "Then let us begin," he said. "But first there is something you must know. Something about the curse, and about the price of breaking it." He paused, his expression turning grave. He reached within the folds of his ancient tunic and drew forth an object, hidden until this moment. The object was a dagger, and it was aimed directly at her heart. Chapter 5. A pact sealed in starlight. Briar gasped, instinctively recoiling from the sight of the dagger, its polished surface gleaming wickedly in the torchlight. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, stark terror. All the nascent trust, the budding connection, shattered in an instant, replaced by a cold, hard fear. What are you doing?" she stammered, her voice a choked whisper, her eyes fixed on the deadly point of the blade. Alaric's expression was unreadable, his golden eyes shadowed, his face a mask of ancient sorrow. He held the dagger steady, his hand unwavering, but he made no move to strike. "This is not what you think," he said, his voice low and laced with a pain that resonated deeper than her fear. "This dagger, it is part of the curse. It is the key to breaking it and to binding us together." Briar stared at him, her mind struggling to comprehend his words. Binding? Together? She had thought he needed her help, her strength, her magic. But this felt like a betrayal, a trap. "Binding?" she questioned, her voice trembling. "What do you mean?" Alaric lowered the dagger slightly, but he didn't put it away. "The curse was woven with blood magic," he explained. "A pact made with ancient forces, sealed with a sacrifice. To break it, a new pact must be made, a new sacrifice offered." He paused, his gaze locking onto hers, the intensity in his eyes almost unbearable. The sorceress, Lyra, she craved immortality. "She bound my soul to this castle, to this half-life, in exchange for eternal youth. But she underestimated the power of love. The curse can only be broken by a willing sacrifice, a bond of blood and soul, forged between two hearts that are connected." Briar's mind reeled. Sacrifice? Blood and soul? She was a widow, a woman who had already sacrificed so much, lost so much. Was he asking her to sacrifice everything? What kind of sacrifice? She whispered, her voice barely audible above the pounding of her heart. Alaric took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling, as if the words themselves were a burden. "A drop of your blood," he said, his voice strained. "Offered willingly to the dagger. It will bind your life force to mine, intertwine our destinies. It will complete the awakening." He looked at her, his golden eyes pleading, desperate. "I know this is a lot to ask. I know it is frightening. But I swear to you, Briar, I will not harm you. This is not a trick. This is the only way." Briar stared at the dagger, her mind racing. She thought of the legends, of the cursed prince, of the woman who could break the curse. She thought of the ring, of the connection she felt to Alaric, of the strange, exhilarating power that surged through her when he touched her. She thought of Thomas, of the life they had shared, of the love they had lost. Could she truly risk everything, for a man she barely knew, for a magic she didn't understand? But then, she looked at Alaric, at the raw pain in his eyes, at the centuries of suffering etched on his face. And she saw something else, something beneath the surface, something that resonated with her own grief, her own loneliness. A longing for connection, for freedom, for life. She closed her eyes, taking a deep, shaky breath. The scent of embers and rain filled her lungs, grounding her, centering her. She thought of the silver ring, the wolf's head, a symbol of loyalty, of courage, of destiny. She slowly extended her hand toward the poised dagger.
"Tell me what to do," she said.
Alaric's eyes showed the barest hint of relief. He reached out and gently took her hand. He carefully pricked the pad of her index finger with the point of the dagger, a tiny bead of blood welling up. It only stung slightly. He brought the blood-tinged tip to his mouth and gave her finger a soft kiss, a surprisingly tender and reverent act. He murmured words, unintelligible, in the ancient tongue. The chamber began to softly glow. Faint starlight appeared to filter through the stone ceiling above. "The pact is made," he said quietly. The starlight now enveloped them. "Now we truly begin." Chapter 6. Echoes of a Shattered Crown. The starlight faded, leaving behind a lingering warmth, a subtle hum of energy that resonated between Briar and Alaric. The small wound on her finger had already closed, leaving only a faint, silvery line, a mark of the pact they had made. Briar felt different, lighter, somehow, yet also more grounded, more connected to the ancient stones of the castle, to the very air around them. Alaric sheathed the dagger, the relief in his golden eyes palpable. He looked at her, a faint smile touching his lips. "Thank you, Briar," he said, his voice softer now, less burdened. "You have given me a gift beyond measure. A chance at redemption." Briar returned his smile, a tentative gesture, still unsure of what she had done, of what the future held. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice regaining some of its strength. Alaric gestured towards the stone table, the runes glowing faintly in the torchlight. "Now we begin your training," he said. "We must unlock your potential, teach you to control the magic that flows within you. And we must prepare." "Prepare for what?" Briar asked, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. The curse was broken, or, at least, the process had begun. But she sensed that this was only the beginning of a much larger, much more dangerous journey. Alaric's expression turned grave. "Lyra, the sorceress who cursed me, she is not gone," he explained. "She is weakened, diminished, but her spirit still lingers, bound to this world by her insatiable hunger for power. She will sense the breaking of the curse. She will seek to reclaim what she believes is rightfully hers." Briar felt a chill run down her spine. She had thought that breaking the curse would be the end of it, that Alaric would be free, and she could return to her life. But now, she realized that she was caught in a web of ancient magic, of betrayal and revenge, a conflict that had spanned centuries. What can she do?" Briar asked, her voice trembling slightly. Alaric's jaw tightened, his golden eyes hardening. "She is a powerful sorceress, even in her weakened state," he said. "She can manipulate the elements, summon shadows, control the minds of the weak. She will use any means necessary to regain her power and to destroy us." He paused, his gaze locking onto hers. "But she underestimates you, Briar. She does not know the strength of your heart, the power of your connection to me. We are bound together now, our destinies intertwined, and together we will defeat her." His words, meant to be reassuring, filled Briar with a sense of foreboding. She was a widow, a woman who had spent her life avoiding conflict, seeking solace in the quiet corners of her existence. How could she possibly face a powerful sorceress, a creature of darkness and malice? I don't know if I can do this," she confessed, her voice filled with doubt. "I'm not a warrior. I'm not a sorceress." Alaric stepped closer, his presence radiating a warmth that chased away some of her fear. He gently cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the contours of her cheekbones. His touch sent a familiar shiver through her, a spark of electricity that ignited a dormant fire within her. "You are stronger than you think, Briar," he said, his voice a low murmur, his golden eyes filled with a belief in her that she didn't yet possess herself. "You have the heart of a wolf, the spirit of a survivor.
And you have me.
I will teach you everything I know. I will protect you. We will face this together." His words, his touch, his unwavering faith in her, gave her a surge of courage, a flicker of hope in the darkness. She looked into his eyes, seeing not the cursed prince, the ancient sorcerer, but a man who had suffered, who had endured, who was reaching out to her for help, for companionship, for love? The thought startled her, a sudden, unexpected jolt to her heart. She had loved Thomas, deeply, completely. She had thought that love was lost forever, buried with him in the cold ground. But here, in this ancient, cursed castle, in the presence of this enigmatic, powerful man, she felt a stirring, a flicker of something she thought she'd extinguished. "Tell me about Lyra," Briar said, her voice steadier now, her gaze unwavering. "Tell me about your past, about your crown." Alaric's expression darkened, a shadow of pain crossing his face. He released her, turning away, walking towards a crumbling tapestry that depicted a golden-haired king, his eyes filled with a fierce, untamed light. It was Alaric, centuries younger, before the curse, before the betrayal. "It is a long story," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of centuries. "A story of love and loss, of power and corruption, of a kingdom shattered by ambition." He began to speak, his voice weaving a tale of a glorious past, of a kingdom called Eldoria, a land of magic and prosperity, ruled by a wise and just king, his father. He spoke of his own youth, his training as a sorcerer, his love for his people, his love for Lyra. As he spoke, the chamber seemed to come alive with echoes of the past, whispers of forgotten voices, glimpses of a world long gone. Briar listened, captivated, her heart aching for the young prince, for the man he had been, for the life that had been stolen from him. The story of his broken crown and lost throne wasn't just history, it was a living wound, and she could feel its raw pain echoing in the very air around them. The tale unfolded, revealing a depth of betrayal she hadn't anticipated, and as Alaric's voice finally trailed off, the silence that followed was heavy with unspoken grief and a renewed sense of danger. Chapter 7. The Dance of Doubt and Desire. The silence lingered, heavy with the weight of Alaric's story, the echoes of a shattered kingdom and a broken heart. Briar felt a profound empathy for him, a deep understanding of his pain, his loss. She, too, knew the sting of betrayal, the emptiness of grief, the slow, agonizing process of rebuilding a life shattered by loss. I'm so sorry, Alaric, she said softly, her voice filled with genuine compassion. "For everything you've endured." He turned to face her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else. Something that made her heart flutter, a spark of something she hadn't felt in years. "Thank you, Briar," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But the past is past. We must focus on the present, on the future. On our survival." He gestured towards the stone table, the runes glowing faintly in the torchlight. "Let us begin your training," he said. "We have much to learn and little time." Over the next few hours, Alaric guided Briar through the basics of the old tongue, the language of magic. He showed her how to draw the runes, how to imbue them with energy, how to speak the words of power. It was challenging, frustrating, at times overwhelming, but Briar persevered, driven by a newfound sense of purpose, a determination to master this strange, exhilarating power that flowed within her. She discovered that she had a natural affinity for the magic, a talent that surprised even Alaric. She learned quickly, her mind absorbing the ancient knowledge like a sponge. She felt a connection to the runes, to the words, to the very energy that permeated the castle, a feeling of belonging, of coming home. But along with the excitement, there was doubt. Doubt in her abilities, doubt in her strength, doubt in the wisdom of her decision to become entangled in this ancient conflict. She was a woman of 62, a widow who had lived a quiet, sheltered life. What made her think she could face a powerful sorceress, a creature of darkness and malice? And then there was the attraction. The undeniable pull she felt towards Alaric, a magnetic force that drew her to him, despite the danger, despite the strangeness of it all. His touch sent shivers through her, his gaze ignited a fire within her, his voice stirred emotions she thought she had buried long ago. It was a dangerous dance, this dance of doubt and desire, a delicate balance between fear and fascination, between caution and surrender. She knew she shouldn't trust him completely, not yet. He was a creature of magic, a being from another time, another world. He had secrets, hidden depths, a past shrouded in darkness. But she couldn't deny the connection she felt to him, the spark of something more than friendship, more than gratitude. It was a spark of hope, of possibility, of a second chance at love. As the hours passed, the storm outside began to subside, the wind dying down, the rain softening to a drizzle. A faint, silvery light filtered through the cracks in the walls, signaling the approach of dawn. Alaric straightened up, his movements stiff, his face etched with fatigue. "We should rest," he said, his voice hoarse. "We have a long journey ahead of us." Briar nodded, exhaustion settling over her like a heavy cloak. She had learned so much, experienced so much, in such a short time. She felt drained, both physically and emotionally. Where do we sleep?" she asked, looking around the chamber, seeing no sign of beds or any other comforts. Alaric gestured towards a narrow passage leading off from the main chamber. "There are other rooms," he said. "Less grand, but more habitable." He led her down the passage, the air growing warmer and drier. They reached a small, circular chamber, furnished with a simple wooden bed, a worn rug, and a single, flickering candle. It was Spartan, but clean and surprisingly cozy. "This was my chamber," Alaric said, his voice tinged with a hint of nostalgia. "Before the curse." Briar looked around the room, imagining him here, centuries ago, a young prince, full of life and hope. She felt a pang of sadness for him, for the life he had lost, for the centuries he had spent trapped in this lonely, desolate place. "It's perfect," she said, her voice soft. Alaric smiled, a faint, wistful smile. "I will leave you to rest," he said. "We will continue your training in the morning." He turned to leave, but then he hesitated, his gaze lingering on her face. He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek. His touch sent a familiar shiver through her, a wave of warmth that spread through her entire body. "Sleep well, Briar Vex," he murmured, his voice a low whisper.
"And dream of me."
He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Briar stood there, her heart pounding, her cheeks flushed, her mind reeling. She was alone, in an ancient, cursed castle, with a man who was both terrifying and irresistible. She climbed into the bed, the rough woolen blankets surprisingly soft against her skin. She blew out the candle, plunging the room into darkness. But even in the darkness, she could still see his face, his golden eyes, his enigmatic smile. She could still feel his touch, his presence, the undeniable pull that drew her to him. She closed her eyes, exhaustion claiming her, pulling her down into the depths of sleep. But even in her dreams, she couldn't escape him. He was there, in the shadows, in the light, in the very fabric of her subconscious, weaving a spell of doubt and desire, of fear and hope. His voice, a low whisper, echoed one final, potent sentence that settled in her very soul. "You will never be alone again, Briar." Chapter 8. Beneath a Crimson Moon. Briar awoke to the sound of birdsong, a cheerful melody that seemed strangely out of place in the desolate surroundings of Eldoria Castle. Sunlight streamed through a narrow window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. She sat up, her body stiff and sore, her mind still reeling from the events of the previous night. It all felt like a dream, a fantastical tale woven from grief and loneliness. But the lingering warmth of Alaric's touch, the faint silvery line on her finger, the memory of his golden eyes, were all too real. She was trapped in a world of magic and danger, bound to a cursed prince, facing a threat she didn't fully understand. She rose from the bed, her movements slow and deliberate. She found a basin of water and a clean cloth on a nearby table, remnants of Alaric's thoughtfulness. She washed her face, the cool water refreshing her, clearing her head. She looked around the chamber, her gaze drawn to a small, wooden chest tucked away in a corner. Curiosity overcoming her, She opened it, finding a collection of clothes simple but well-made garments, woven from soft wool and linen. They were clearly ancient, but surprisingly well-preserved. She hesitated, then, realizing that her own clothes were still damp and soiled from the storm, she decided to change. She found a long, flowing gown of deep green, embroidered with silver thread, and a pair of soft leather boots. The clothes fit her perfectly, as if they had been made for her. As she dressed, she felt a strange sense of transformation. She was no longer just Briar Vex, the grieving widow, the lonely inhabitant of Blackwood Manor. She was something more. A woman on a journey, a woman embracing a destiny she had never imagined. She left the chamber, venturing back into the main chamber where she had begun her training the night before. Alaric was already there, standing by the stone table, his gaze fixed on the runes. He looked up as she approached, his golden eyes lighting up with a warmth that sent a familiar shiver through her. "You slept well?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. Briar nodded. "Better than I expected," she replied, her voice still a little hoarse. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes.
"Good," he said.
"We have much to do today." Over the next few hours, Alaric continued her training, guiding her through more complex runes, teaching her to channel her energy, to control the flow of magic within her. She learned to summon small flames, to levitate objects, to create illusions. It was exhilarating, empowering, but also frightening. She was wielding a power she didn't fully understand, a power that could be both creative and destructive. As she practiced, she noticed a change in Alaric. He was more relaxed, more open, his usual guarded demeanor softening. He laughed, he teased, he shared stories of his past, of his life before the curse. She saw glimpses of the man he had been, the charming, witty, compassionate prince, hidden beneath the layers of sorrow and solitude. And she found herself drawn to him, more and more, with each passing hour. The attraction she felt was undeniable, a magnetic force that pulled her towards him, despite the danger, despite the uncertainty. She found herself stealing glances at him, admiring the way the sunlight caught his raven hair, the way his golden eyes sparkled when he laughed, the way his strong hands moved with such grace and precision as he drew the runes. It was a dangerous game, this dance of desire, a perilous path she was treading. She knew she shouldn't allow herself to feel this way, not yet. He was still a mystery, a creature of magic, a being from another time. He had secrets, hidden depths, a past shrouded in darkness. But she couldn't deny the longing that grew within her, the yearning for connection, for companionship, for love. It was a feeling she thought she had buried with Thomas, a feeling she had believed was lost forever. But here, in this ancient, cursed castle, in the presence of this enigmatic, powerful man, it was blossoming anew, stronger, more intense than ever before. As evening approached, the sky outside turned a deep, fiery red, the setting sun casting long, ominous shadows across the landscape. Alaric stopped her training, his expression turning grave. "Tonight is the crimson moon," he said, his voice low and laced with a hint of apprehension. "It is a night of heightened magic, a night when the veil between worlds is thin. It is a night when Lyra will be at her strongest." Briar felt a chill run down her spine. She had almost forgotten about the sorceress, about the threat she posed. The crimson moon, it sounded ominous, dangerous. What does that mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Alaric's jaw tightened. "It means we must be prepared," he said. "She will likely attempt to contact you, to test your strength, to lure you to her side. She will use your fears, your doubts, your desires against you." He paused, his gaze locking onto hers, the intensity in his eyes almost unbearable. "You must be strong, Briar. You must resist her. You must trust me." His words, meant to be reassuring, filled her with a sense of foreboding. She knew she was vulnerable, susceptible to Lyra's manipulations. She was still learning, still grappling with her newfound powers, still struggling with her own doubts and desires. "I'll try," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Alaric nodded, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of concern and determination. "We will face this together," he said. "I will protect you." He reached out and took her hand, his touch sending a jolt of energy through her, a surge of warmth that chased away some of her fear. He led her towards a large window, overlooking the cliffs and the sea. The crimson moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie, blood-red glow over the landscape. "Tonight," Alaric said, his voice a low murmur, "we will stand together, beneath the crimson moon, and we will show Lyra that we are not afraid." His grip on her hand tightened, and his other arm encircled her waist, pulling her firmly against the solid wall of his chest. Her breath caught. He was so close. And the moon grew, ever redder. Chapter 9. The Hunters of Eldoria's Gate. The crimson moon bathed the landscape in its eerie, blood-red light, casting long, distorted shadows that danced across the crumbling walls of Eldoria Castle. Briar stood beside Alaric, pressed close against him, his arm a solid, comforting presence around her waist. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her back, a rhythm that strangely mirrored her own, despite the fear that gnawed at her. She gazed out at the transformed landscape. The familiar coastline, usually a picturesque vista of cliffs and sea, now seemed menacing, alien. The waves crashed against the rocks with a ferocity that mirrored the turmoil within her. "She's coming, isn't she?" Briar whispered, her voice barely audible above the howling wind. Alaric nodded, his jaw tight, his golden eyes scanning the horizon. "She will sense the shift in power," he said. "The weakening of the curse. She will come seeking answers. And revenge." His words sent a shiver down her spine. She had faced her own fears, her own doubts, in the past few days. But facing a powerful sorceress, a creature of darkness and malice, was a different matter entirely. She was still learning, still grappling with her newfound powers, still unsure of her own strength. Suddenly, Alaric stiffened, his body going rigid. He released her, his hand moving to the hilt of a sword that she hadn't noticed before, strapped to his side. "What is it?" Briar asked, her voice laced with alarm. "We are not alone," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "There are others here." He moved swiftly towards the arched entrance of the courtyard, his senses heightened, his body poised for action. Briar followed him, her heart pounding, her own senses on high alert. As they reached the entrance, they saw them. Figures emerging from the shadows, their forms silhouetted against the crimson moon. They were men, clad in dark leather armor, armed with swords and bows, their faces grim and determined. They were hunters.
"Halt!"
One of the men shouted, his voice harsh and commanding. "By order of the Council of Oakhaven, you are under arrest." Briar's eyes widened in surprise. The Council of Oakhaven? The villagers? What were they doing here? Alaric stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We mean you no harm," he said. "We are simply silence." The man interrupted. "We know who you are, Alaric of Eldoria, the cursed prince, the creature of darkness. And you," he said, pointing an accusing finger at Briar, "you are his accomplice, his witch." Briar gasped, recoiling from the accusation. "Witch?" She was no witch. She was just Briar, a woman caught in a web of magic and circumstance. "You misunderstand," Briar began, her voice trembling. "We are not enough lies." The man shouted.
"Seize them!"
The hunters surged forward, their weapons drawn, their faces filled with a mixture of fear and hatred. Briar instinctively stepped back, her hand reaching for Alaric's. "Run, Briar." Alaric commanded, his voice urgent. "Get back inside the castle." He pushed her towards the entrance, then turned to face the hunters, his sword drawn, his golden eyes blazing with defiance. He met their attack with a ferocity that surprised Briar. He moved with a speed and agility that belied his ancient age, his sword a blur of silver in the crimson moonlight. Briar hesitated, torn between her desire to flee and her loyalty to Alaric. She couldn't leave him to face the hunters alone. She had made a pact, a bond of blood and soul. She was bound to him, just as he was bound to her. She drew upon the magic she had learned, the runes Alaric had taught her. She focused her energy, channeling it through her hands, summoning a shield of shimmering light. It was weak, flickering, but it was enough to deflect a stray arrow that had been aimed at Alaric's back. "Alaric," she cried, her voice filled with a newfound determination. "I'm with you." He glanced back at her, his eyes widening in surprise, then softening with a mixture of gratitude and pride. "Stay close," he said, his voice tight. "And be careful." Together, they fought back, Alaric with his sword, Briar with her newly awakened magic. They were outnumbered, outmatched, but they fought with a courage and determination that surprised even themselves. They were fighting for their lives, for their freedom, for each other. The hunters, fueled by fear and superstition, pressed their attack, but Alaric and Briar held their ground, a beacon of defiance against the encroaching darkness. The battle raged, the clash of steel echoing through the ancient courtyard, the air thick with the scent of blood and magic. It was a desperate struggle, a fight for survival, beneath the ominous glow of the crimson moon. And, as one of the hunters lunged toward her, Briar noticed something glint from within his grasp, a glint of silver. A wolf's head. Chapter 10. Whispers in the ancient tongue. The glint of silver, the wolf's head on the hunter's ring, sent a jolt of recognition through Briar. It was the same design as her own ring, the symbol of her connection to Alaric, the key to breaking the curse. But how could one of the hunters, a man sworn to destroy Alaric, possess such a ring? Her momentary distraction almost cost her dearly. The hunter lunged, his sword aimed at her heart. Alaric, seeing her danger, roared and intervened, deflecting the blow with his own blade. The hunter stumbled back, his eyes filled with surprise and rage. "Briar, focus." Alaric shouted, his voice strained. "We cannot afford any mistakes." His words snapped her back to the present, to the immediate danger. She pushed aside her confusion, her questions, and focused on the battle, on survival. She channeled her energy, summoning her shield, deflecting blows, casting small spells of confusion and disorientation. The fight was brutal, chaotic. The hunters, fueled by fear and superstition, were relentless in their attack. Alaric fought with a skill and ferocity born of centuries of experience, but he was tiring, his movements slowing, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Briar, too, was nearing her limit. Her magic, still new and untamed, was draining her energy, leaving her feeling weak and vulnerable. She knew they couldn't hold out much longer. They were outnumbered, outmatched, and the crimson moon, hanging heavy in the sky, seemed to amplify the hunters' strength, their fanaticism. Suddenly, one of the hunters, the one with the wolf's head ring, broke away from the main group. He circled around, his eyes fixed on Briar, a strange expression on his face, a mixture of hatred and something else. Something that looked like recognition? "You," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "You are the key. You are the one who can end this." He lunged at her, not with his sword, but with his hands outstretched, as if he intended to grab her. Alaric, seeing the danger, roared and tried to intervene, but he was surrounded by other hunters, their swords pressing him back. Briar, acting on instinct, raised her hand, the silver ring gleaming in the crimson moonlight. She focused her energy, channeling it through the ring, speaking the words of the old tongue that Alaric had taught her, the words of binding, of protection. A surge of power erupted from the ring, a wave of golden light that slammed into the hunter, throwing him back, sending him sprawling on the ground. He lay there, dazed, his eyes wide with shock and fear. The other hunters paused, momentarily stunned by the display of power. They looked at Briar, at the ring, at the fallen hunter, their faces filled with a mixture of awe and terror. Alaric seized the opportunity. He pressed his attack, his sword a blur of silver, forcing the hunters back, creating a space between them and Briar. "Briar, the gate," he shouted, his voice urgent. We must get to the gate. He pointed towards a crumbling archway leading out of the courtyard, towards the cliffs. It was their only chance of escape. Briar nodded, her heart pounding. She followed Alaric, her legs pumping, her lungs burning. They ran, dodging blows, deflecting arrows, fighting their way towards the gate. The hunters, recovering from their shock, pursued them, their shouts echoing through the courtyard. But Briar and Alaric were faster, more agile, driven by a desperate need to escape. They reached the archway, slipping through just as the hunters closed in. They found themselves on a narrow path, winding along the edge of the cliffs, the sea crashing below. It was a treacherous path, dangerous, but it was their only hope. They ran, their breath coming in ragged gasps, the hunters close behind. The crimson moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie, blood-red glow over the landscape, making it seem even more treacherous, more alien. Suddenly, Alaric stopped, his hand raised. "Wait," he said, his voice low. "Listen." Briar paused, her heart pounding. She listened, straining to hear above the sound of the wind and the waves. And then she heard it, a faint, whispering voice, carried on the wind, speaking in the old tongue, the language of magic. "Briar," Vex the voice whispered. "Daughter of Eldoria." Briar's eyes widened in surprise. The voice, it was calling to her. But how? Who was speaking? "It's Lyra," Alaric said, his voice grim. "She's trying to reach you, to control you." He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with concern. "You must resist her, Briar. Do not listen to her. Do not trust her." The whispering grew louder.
"Come, to me."
Briar suddenly had a vision of the silver dagger Alaric used for the blood pact, only now it was in Lyra's hands. Chapter 11. The Price of a Stolen Heart. Lyra's voice, a silken whisper on the wind, slithered into Briar's mind, weaving a tapestry of promises and lies. The vision of the dagger, now in the sorceress's hands, was a potent symbol, a threat veiled in an offer of power. "Come to me, Briar, vexed daughter of Eldoria." The voice purred, "that I can give you everything you desired, powered, and knowledge, immortality." Briar swayed, her head spinning, the whispers tempting, alluring. She felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing her toward something. Something dark, something dangerous, but also something strangely appealing. Alaric grabbed her arm, his grip firm, grounding her. "Briar, don't listen to her," he shouted, his voice urgent, desperate. "She's trying to manipulate you. She's trying to steal your soul." His words, his touch, broke through the fog of Lyra's influence, bringing her back to the present, to the reality of their perilous situation. She looked at Alaric, at his golden eyes, filled with concern and fear. Fear for her. She shook her head, trying to clear her mind, to resist the seductive whispers. "I won't," she stammered, her voice trembling. I won't let her." But Lyra's voice was persistent, insidious. It wormed its way into her thoughts, exploiting her doubts, her fears, her desires. "You nothing without me." The voice hissed, "A weak old woman destined that fade away. But with me, you can so much more." The vision shifted, showing Briar herself, younger, stronger, radiating with power, standing beside Lyra, ruling over Eldoria. It was a tempting image, a seductive lie. Briar felt a tear roll down her cheek. She thought of Thomas, of the life they had shared, of the love they had lost. She thought of the emptiness she had felt since his death, the feeling of being lost, adrift. Was Lyra right? Was she nothing without her? Alaric tightened his grip on her arm, his voice a low, desperate plea. "Briar, please. Remember who you are. Remember us." His words, the raw emotion in his voice, struck a chord within her. She looked at him, at his face, etched with concern and love. Yes, love. She saw it now, clear as day, in his golden eyes, in the way he held her, in the way he fought for her. She had found something precious, something worth fighting for, in this ancient, cursed castle, in the presence of this enigmatic, powerful man. She had found a connection, a bond, a second chance at love. She closed her eyes, focusing on that love, on that connection, on the strength it gave her. She drew upon the magic she had learned, the runes Alaric had taught her. She spoke the words of the old tongue, the words of protection, of defiance. "I am Briarvex," she said, her voice gaining strength, her words echoing on the wind. "And I am not yours." A surge of power erupted from her, a wave of golden light that pushed back against Lyra's influence, silencing the whispers, shattering the vision. She opened her eyes, her vision clear, her mind focused. Alaric looked at her, his eyes filled with relief and admiration. "You did it," he said, his voice soft. "You resisted her." Briar nodded, her body trembling with the effort. She felt drained, exhausted, but also empowered. She had faced her demons, her doubts, her desires, and she had prevailed. But the danger was far from over. The hunters were still pursuing them, their shouts growing closer. And Lyra, though momentarily repelled, was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for another opportunity to strike. "We have to keep moving," Alaric said, his voice urgent. "We have to get away from here." He led her along the treacherous path, the cliffs looming above them, the sea crashing below. They ran, their breath coming in ragged gasps, their bodies aching, their spirits weary. Suddenly, the path ahead crumbled, collapsing into the sea below. They were trapped, cornered, with nowhere left to run. The hunters closed in, their faces grim and determined, their weapons drawn. They had them surrounded, outnumbered, outmatched. Alaric stood defiant, his sword raised, his golden eyes blazing. He was ready to fight, to die, protecting her. Briar stood beside him, her hand reaching for his, their fingers intertwining. She was afraid, terrified, but she was not alone. She had Alaric, and she had her magic. He looked deeply into her eyes. "It seems," Alaric began, his voice calm despite their imminent doom. "Fate has another twist for us." He squeezed her hand. The lead hunter stepped before them, a wicked smirk twisting his cruel lips. "It's over, Prince," the hunter said mockingly. Alaric's grip tightened around her hand. "Not yet," Alaric whispered to her. "Trust me." And as the hunters moved to attack, Alaric closed his eyes and began to chant. Chapter 12. Through the veil of twisted paths, Alaric's chanting, a low, resonant hum in the old tongue, filled the air, vibrating with power. The crimson moon seemed to pulse in response, its blood-red light intensifying, casting an eerie glow over the scene. The hunters hesitated, their faces a mixture of confusion and apprehension. Briar watched Alaric, her heart pounding, her mind racing. What was he doing? What magic was he invoking? She had never seen him like this, so focused, so powerful, so otherworldly. The air around them crackled with energy, a palpable force that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, the sound of the crashing waves below growing louder, more violent. Suddenly, a swirling vortex of light appeared before them, a shimmering portal shimmering between worlds. It was a chaotic, unstable energy, twisting and turning, its edges flickering with an otherworldly glow. What is that?" Briar whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. Alaric opened his eyes, his golden gaze intense, focused. "A gateway," he said, his voice strained. "A passage to another realm. It's our only chance." He looked at her, his eyes pleading, desperate. "Trust me, Briar. We have to jump." Jump? Into that swirling vortex of chaotic energy? It was madness. It was suicide. But she looked at Alaric, at his face, etched with determination and love. And she knew she had no choice. She trusted him. She had to. "Together," she said, her voice firm, her hand tightening around his. He nodded, his gaze locking onto hers. "Together," he repeated. They took a deep breath, bracing themselves. And then they jumped. They plunged into the vortex, the world dissolving around them into a chaotic swirl of colors and light. Briar felt a sensation of falling, of being pulled apart and put back together, of being unmade and remade. It was terrifying, exhilarating, overwhelming. She clung to Alaric, her eyes squeezed shut, her body trembling. She could feel his presence beside her, his hand holding hers, a lifeline in the chaos. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. They landed on solid ground, their bodies sprawled, their breath coming in ragged gasps. Briar opened her eyes, blinking, trying to make sense of their surroundings. They were in a forest, a strange, alien forest, unlike any she had ever seen. The trees were tall and twisted, their branches gnarled and knotted, their leaves a deep, vibrant purple. The air was thick and humid, filled with the scent of strange flowers and something else. Something ancient, something magical. The crimson moon still hung in the sky, but it was smaller, fainter, casting a pale, ethereal glow over the landscape. Where are we?" Briar asked, her voice hoarse. Alaric slowly sat up, his gaze scanning their surroundings. "The Shadowlands," he said, his voice grim. "A realm between worlds, a place of lost souls and forgotten magic." He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. Briar nodded, her body aching, her head spinning. I think so," she replied. "But what now?" Alaric rose to his feet, his movement stiff, his face etched with fatigue. "We must find shelter," he said. "And we must find a way back." He helped her to her feet, his touch gentle, reassuring. They began to walk, their footsteps silent on the soft, spongy ground. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sounds their own breathing and the rustling of the strange, purple leaves. As they walked, Briar felt a growing sense of unease. The Shadowlands, it was a place of darkness, of danger, of despair. She could feel it in the air, in the silence, in the very ground beneath her feet. "Alaric," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I don't like this place." He nodded, his jaw tight. "I know," he said, "but we have no choice. We must persevere." They walked for hours, the forest seemingly endless, the landscape unchanging. They saw no signs of life, no creatures, no other beings. Only the twisted trees, the purple leaves, and the eerie silence. As darkness began to fall, the crimson moon setting below the horizon, they finally found shelter, a small cave, hidden behind a curtain of thick vines. It was damp, cold, but it was safe, at least for now. They huddled together, sharing their body heat, trying to ward off the chill. Alaric used his magic to create a small fire, the flames casting a flickering, golden light that pushed back against the darkness. They sat in silence, exhausted, hungry, and afraid. They had escaped the hunters, they had escaped Lyra's influence, but they were now trapped in a strange, alien realm, with no idea how to get back home. The path ahead was uncertain, treacherous, their future unknown. The weight of their situation pressed down on them, heavy, suffocating. Briar closed her eyes and, just before exhaustion took her, Alaric's voice, barely audible, broke the silence. "I will get us home, Briar," he promised. "I swear it." Chapter 13. The Serpent's Kiss and the Wolf's Embrace. Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and troubled, filled with fragmented images of swirling vortexes, crimson moons, and whispering voices. Briar awoke with a start, her heart pounding, her body covered in a cold sweat. Alaric was still asleep beside her, his face pale and drawn, his breathing shallow. The small fire he had conjured had burned down to embers, casting a faint, flickering glow over the cave. The air was cold and damp, the silence heavy and oppressive. Briar sat up, her mind racing. The Shadowlands, it was a place of darkness, of despair, a realm where hope seemed to wither and die. She looked at Alaric, at his sleeping form, and felt a surge of protectiveness, of love. He had risked everything for her, sacrificing his own safety, his own freedom, to save her from the hunters, from Lyra. He had brought her to this strange, alien realm, a place of danger and uncertainty, but he had promised to get them home. She reached out, her fingers gently brushing his cheek. His skin was cool to the touch, his breathing still shallow.
She worried about him.
He had used a tremendous amount of magic to create the gateway, to escape the hunters. He was exhausted, drained, vulnerable. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence, a faint, hissing sound, coming from the entrance of the cave. Briar froze, her heart leaping into her throat. She listened, straining to hear, her senses on high alert. The hissing grew louder, closer. And then she saw it. A pair of glowing, yellow eyes, peering out from the darkness, behind the curtain of vines. A large, sinuous form, slithering slowly into the cave. A serpent. A giant serpent. Its scales shimmering in the faint light, its tongue flickering in and out, tasting the air. It was unlike any snake she had ever seen, its eyes intelligent, malevolent, its presence radiating a dark, menacing energy. Briar gasped, recoiling in fear. She instinctively reached for Alaric, shaking him awake. "Alaric, wake up," she whispered, her voice urgent, desperate. He stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He saw the serpent, his body instantly tensing, his golden eyes widening in alarm. "Lyra," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "She found us." The serpent slithered closer, its hissing growing louder, its yellow eyes fixed on Briar. It spoke, its voice a sibilant whisper, echoing in the cave. "Briar, Vex." The serpent hissed, "You cannot escape me. You dared at mine." It was Lyra's voice, twisted, distorted, but unmistakable. She had taken the form of a serpent, a creature of darkness and deceit, a symbol of her true nature. Alaric rose to his feet, his movements slow and deliberate. He stood between Briar and the serpent, his body shielding her, his hand reaching for the hilt of his sword, which, thankfully, he had managed to keep hold of through their frantic flight. "Leave her alone, Lyra," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "She is not yours. She is mine." The serpent hissed, its tongue flickering, its yellow eyes narrowing. "You cannot protect her, Alaric." It whispered that you are weak, drained, she will be mine. It lunged, its fangs bared, aiming for Briar. Alaric roared, his sword flashing, deflecting the attack. The serpent recoiled, hissing in anger and frustration. Alaric and the serpent battled, their forms a blur of motion in the confined space of the cave. The clash of steel against scales echoed in the darkness, the air thick with the scent of blood and magic. Briar watched, her heart pounding, her body trembling. She wanted to help, to use her magic, but she was afraid, terrified. She was still learning, still unsure of her powers. And Lyra, even in this serpentine form, was a formidable opponent, her magic dark and powerful. Suddenly, the serpent coiled around Alaric, its powerful body constricting, squeezing the life out of him. He gasped, his face turning pale, his sword falling from his grasp. "Alaric!" Briar screamed, her voice filled with terror and despair. She knew she had to do something, anything. She couldn't just stand there and watch him die. She drew upon her magic, focusing her energy, channeling it through her hands, summoning the runes Alaric had taught her. She spoke the words of the old tongue, the words of power, of protection, of transformation. A surge of energy erupted from her, a wave of golden light that slammed into the serpent, forcing it to release Alaric. He fell to the ground, gasping for breath, his body bruised and battered. The serpent turned its attention to Briar, its yellow eyes blazing with fury.
"You dare."
It hissed that you dare to interfere. It lunged at her, its fangs bared, ready to strike. But Briar was ready. She stood her ground, her body radiating with golden light, her eyes filled with a newfound determination, a newfound strength. She met the serpent's attack, not with fear, but with courage. Not with weakness, but with power. Not with despair, but with love. And, in that moment, something shifted. Something changed. Briar felt a surge of energy unlike anything she had ever experienced, a power that flowed through her veins, transforming her, empowering her. She felt a shift, a change in her own form. Fur sprouted, claws extended, teeth sharpened. She was no longer Briar Vex, the grieving widow, the hesitant student of magic. She was something more. She was a wolf, a great, silver she-wolf, standing protectively over Alaric. She roared. Chapter 14. Where Shadows Lie and Secrets Bloom. The roar, a primal sound of defiance and power, echoed through the cave, shaking the very foundations of the Shadowlands. The serpent, Lyra's serpentine form, recoiled in surprise and fear. It had underestimated Briar, underestimated the power of her connection to Alaric, the strength of her love, the depth of her hidden magic. The she-wolf, Briar's transformed self, stood protectively over Alaric, her silver fur bristling, her teeth bared, her eyes glowing with a fierce, golden light. She was a creature of instinct, of power, of the wild. The serpent hissed, its yellow eyes flickering with uncertainty. "What is this?" It whispered, its voice laced with disbelief and apprehension. "You are more than you seem." Briar, in her wolf form, growled, a low, guttural sound that resonated with ancient power. She couldn't speak, not in this form, but her thoughts, her emotions, were clear, amplified by the transformation. "I am what I need to be." She lunged, her claws extended, her teeth snapping. The serpent struck back, its fangs dripping with venom, its body coiling and thrashing. It was a battle of instinct, of primal force, a clash between darkness and light, between serpent and wolf. The cave echoed with the sounds of their struggle, the tearing of flesh, the snapping of scales, the growls and hisses of combat. Briar, in her wolf form, was faster, more agile, her movements fluid and graceful. She dodged the serpent's strikes, her claws raking across its scales, drawing blood. The serpent, though powerful, was hampered by its size, its movements restricted by the confines of the cave. It lashed out, its tail smashing against the walls, sending rocks and debris flying. Alaric, slowly regaining his strength, watched the battle, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of awe and pride. He had known Briar was strong, resilient, but he had never imagined she possessed such power, such wildness. He reached for his fallen sword, his hand trembling, his body still aching from the serpent's constriction. He had to help her, to support her, even in this weakened state. He rose to his feet, his movements slow and deliberate. He focused his remaining energy, channeling it through his sword, summoning the runes of the old tongue. He spoke the words of power, of strengthening, of binding. He was not binding Briar to him, but lending his remaining strength to her. A surge of energy flowed from his sword, a wave of golden light that enveloped Briar, the she-wolf. She felt it, a surge of renewed strength, of enhanced power. Her fur glowed brighter, her claws sharpened, her teeth elongated. She roared, a sound of pure, untamed power, and lunged at the serpent, her jaws closing around its neck. She shook it violently, her teeth tearing through its scales, its flesh, its magic. The serpent shrieked, a sound of pain and terror, its body thrashing wildly. Its form flickered, its serpentine shape dissolving, revealing glimpses of Lyra's true form, a pale, gaunt woman, her eyes filled with hatred and fear. Briar, fueled by Alaric's magic and her own, held on, her jaws clamped tight, her teeth sinking deeper. She felt the serpent's life force draining away, its magic weakening, its power fading. And then, with a final, agonizing shriek, the serpent dissolved completely, leaving behind only a wisp of black smoke that dissipated into the air. Lyra, in her serpentine form, was defeated. Briar slowly transformed back, her fur receding, her claws retracting, her teeth returning to normal. She collapsed to the ground, exhausted, drained, but victorious. She was Briar Vex once more, the woman, not the wolf. Alaric rushed to her side, kneeling beside her, his hands gently caressing her face. "Briar, are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with concern and relief. She nodded, her body aching, her head spinning. "I think so," she replied, her voice hoarse. "What happened?" He helped her to sit up, his arms supporting her. "You transformed," he said, his voice filled with awe. "You became a wolf. You saved us." Briar looked at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. A wolf? She had transformed into a wolf. It was impossible, preposterous, yet she remembered it, the power, the instinct, the wildness. "The ring," Alaric said, his gaze drawn to the silver ring on her finger, the wolf's head gleaming in the faint light. "It's more than just a key. It's a part of you. A part of your heritage." He paused, his expression turning grave. "Your dream about the shadows, the golden light, the hunter with the same ring, your lineage, it all points to one thing." He took a deep breath. "Briar, you are a descendant of Eldoria's ancient protectors, the Wolf Guard, shapeshifters sworn to protect the royal line." The weight of this revelation, the implications of her ancestry, settled upon her. It was a secret that bloomed in the shadows of this strange land, a truth that would forever alter the course of her life. The silence that followed was broken only by their ragged breaths and the distant, mournful echo of something unknown, howling in the depths of the Shadowlands. Chapter 15. The Chains of Fate and Freedom. The revelation of Briar's ancestry, her lineage as a descendant of the Wolf Guard, hung heavy in the air, a profound shift in their understanding of her identity, her purpose, and her connection to Alaric and Eldoria. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the distant howl, a mournful cry that seemed to resonate with the ancient secrets of the Shadowlands. "The Wolf Guard," Briar whispered, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. "Shapeshifters, protectors." She looked at her hands, at the silver ring, at the faint, silvery line on her finger, the mark of the pact she had made with Alaric. It all made sense now, her affinity for magic, her connection to the castle, her ability to awaken Alaric, her transformation. Alaric nodded, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of understanding and sadness. "They were a powerful clan," he explained, "loyal to the crown, sworn to protect Eldoria from its enemies. But they were hunted, persecuted, driven to near extinction by Lyra and her followers." He paused, his gaze turning inward, as if reliving the pain of the past. "She feared their power, their loyalty to me. She saw them as a threat, an obstacle to her ambition. She destroyed them." Briar felt a surge of anger, of righteous indignation, at the injustice, the cruelty, the betrayal. Lyra had not only cursed Alaric, she had also decimated his people, his protectors, his friends. "But I'm here," Briar said, her voice gaining strength, her eyes hardening with determination. "I'm a descendant of the Wolf Guard, and I won't let her win." Alaric looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a renewed hope, a spark of light in the darkness of the Shadowlands. "I know you won't, Briar," he said, his voice soft. "You are strong, resilient, and you have a power that even Lyra fears." He reached out and took her hand, his touch sending a familiar shiver through her, a surge of warmth that chased away some of her fear. "We must find a way back to Eldoria," he said. "We must finish what we started." But the Shadowlands were a treacherous realm, a place of lost souls and forgotten magic. They had no map, no guide, no clear path to follow. They were alone, surrounded by darkness, facing an uncertain future. How do we get back?" Briar asked, her voice laced with doubt. Alaric's jaw tightened. "I don't know," he admitted. "The gateway I created was unstable, a desperate measure. I don't know if I can replicate it." He paused, his gaze searching the darkness, as if looking for answers in the shadows. "But there are other ways," he said. "Other paths. We must find them." They began to explore the cave, searching for clues, for any sign of a way out. The walls were covered in strange carvings, ancient symbols that seemed to hum with a faint energy. Alaric recognized some of them, remnants of the old tongue, but others were unfamiliar, alien. As they explored, Briar felt a strange pull, a sense of familiarity, as if she had been here before, in a dream, in a forgotten memory. She reached out, her fingers tracing the carvings, her mind reaching for something. Suddenly, she felt a jolt of energy, a surge of power that flowed through her, connecting her to the cave, to the Shadowlands, to something else. She gasped, her eyes widening in surprise. She saw a vision, a fleeting image of a hidden path, a secret passage, leading somewhere. Alaric, she cried, her voice filled with excitement. I think I know a way. She pointed towards a section of the cave wall, where the carvings seemed to be different, more intricate, more alive. Alaric looked at her, his eyes filled with hope and trust. Show me, he said. She led him to the wall, her fingers tracing the carvings, her mind focusing on the vision she had seen. She spoke the words of the old tongue, the words of opening, of revealing, of unlocking. The wall shimmered, the carvings glowing with a faint, golden light. And then, slowly, a section of the wall began to dissolve, revealing a hidden passage, leading into the darkness. It was a narrow, winding passage, its walls damp and cold, its air heavy and oppressive. But it was a path, a way forward, a chance to escape the Shadowlands. They stepped through the opening, leaving the cave behind, venturing into the unknown. The passage twisted and turned, leading them deeper and deeper into the heart of the Shadowlands. The air grew colder, the darkness more intense, the silence more profound. They walked for hours, their footsteps echoing in the narrow passage, their breath coming in ragged gasps. They saw no signs of life, no creatures, no other beings. Only the darkness, the silence, and the whispers. Faint, whispering voices, carried on the wind, speaking in the old tongue, the language of magic. They were not Lyra's voice, not this time. They were something else, something ancient, something mournful, lost at souls. The voices whispered, trapped between worlds, seeking release. Briar felt a pang of sadness, of empathy for these lost souls, these forgotten beings. She understood their pain, their loneliness, their despair. Alaric, she said, her voice soft. Can we help them? He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of compassion and resignation. I don't know, Briar, he said. Their fate is intertwined with the Shadowlands. We may not have the power to free them. He paused, his gaze searching hers.
But we can honor them, he said.
We can remember them. They continued their journey, their hearts heavy with the weight of the lost souls, their steps guided by the faint whispers, their hope fueled by the promise of escape, of freedom. The chains of fate had brought them to this dark realm, but their own choices, their own courage, their own love, would determine whether they could break free. As they pressed onward, the whispers began, slowly, one by one, to quiet and fall silent. Chapter 16. A tapestry woven with tears and hope. The whispers faded, leaving behind a profound silence, broken only by their footsteps and the occasional drip of water echoing through the narrow passage. The air grew colder, the darkness more intense, but Briar felt a growing sense of anticipation. They were nearing something, approaching a destination. Suddenly, the passage opened into a vast cavern, a breathtaking spectacle of natural beauty and otherworldly magic. The cavern was illuminated by a soft, ethereal glow, emanating from strange, luminescent crystals that grew on the walls and ceiling. Waterfalls cascaded down the walls, forming pools of shimmering water on the cavern floor. Strange plants, unlike any she had ever seen, grew in abundance, their leaves and flowers a vibrant array of colors. It was a hidden oasis, a sanctuary of light and life, in the heart of the Shadowlands. A place of beauty and wonder, a stark contrast to the darkness and despair they had encountered so far. What is this place? Briar whispered, her voice filled with awe. Alaric, too, seemed stunned by the sight, his golden eyes wide with surprise and wonder. I don't know, he admitted. I've never seen anything like it. He paused, his gaze scanning the cavern, his senses on high alert. But I sense magic here, he said. Powerful magic. Ancient magic. They began to explore the cavern, their footsteps silent on the soft, mossy ground. They saw no signs of life, no creatures, no other beings. Only the luminescent crystals, the cascading waterfalls, the strange plants, and the silence. As they explored, Briar felt a growing sense of peace. The cavern was a sanctuary, a refuge from the darkness and despair of the Shadowlands. A place where hope could blossom, where wounds could heal, where love could flourish. She looked at Alaric, at his face, etched with fatigue and worry, but also with a hint of wonder, a spark of hope. She reached out and took his hand, her touch sending a familiar shiver through her, a surge of warmth that chased away the chill of the cavern. We'll find a way back, Alaric, she said, her voice firm, her eyes filled with determination. We'll get through this. Together. He squeezed her hand, his golden eyes locking onto hers, his gaze filled with gratitude and love. I know we will, Briar, he said, his voice soft. With you I can face anything. They sat down beside one of the shimmering pools, the water reflecting the soft, ethereal glow of the crystals. They shared their remaining food, a meager meal, but it tasted like a feast, a celebration of their survival, their resilience, their love. As they sat there, in the silence, in the beauty, in the magic of the cavern, they talked. They shared their stories, their dreams, their fears, their hopes. They spoke of their past, of their present, of their future. Briar told Alaric about her life with Thomas, about their love, their loss, their quiet, simple existence. She spoke of her grief, her loneliness, her emptiness. Alaric told Briar more about his life before the curse, about his kingdom, his people, his betrayal. He spoke of his hopes, his dreams, his regrets. They listened to each other, their hearts open, their souls connected, their love growing stronger with each shared word, each shared silence, each shared breath. As they talked, Briar noticed something shimmering in the water, beneath the surface of the pool. She reached out, her fingers brushing against something smooth and cool. She pulled it out, her eyes widening in surprise. It was a tapestry woven from threads of silver and gold, depicting a scene of Eldoria. It showed the castle, the cliffs, the sea, but it was different. It was Eldoria as it had been centuries ago, before the curse, before the betrayal. A vibrant, thriving kingdom, filled with life and magic. The tapestry seemed to hum with a faint energy, a whisper of the past, a glimpse of a lost world. Alaric, Briar said, her voice filled with awe.
Look.
He looked at the tapestry, his golden eyes widening in recognition. It's Eldoria, he whispered.
But how?
He reached out and touched the tapestry, his fingers tracing the intricate details, his mind reaching for something. Suddenly, he gasped, his eyes widening in realization. The Weaver, he said, his voice filled with excitement. The Weaver of Destinies. Legend says she resides in the Shadowlands, in a hidden sanctuary, weaving the tapestries of fate, recording the past, the present, and the future. He looked at Briar, his golden eyes shining with hope. This cavern, it's her sanctuary, he said. And this tapestry, it's a clue. A way back. They examined the tapestry more closely, searching for clues, for any sign of a way to return to Eldoria. They noticed a small, almost imperceptible detail, a hidden path, leading away from the castle, towards a portal. It was a faint, almost invisible image, but it was there. A way back. A chance to reclaim their lives, their destinies, their love. The tapestry, woven with tears and hope, held the key to their freedom. A renewed sense of purpose filled them, a burning desire to return, to fight, to win. And, as they studied the intricately woven scene, a faint sound, barely audible, reached their ears. It was the sound of weaving, of threads being pulled and intertwined, coming from deeper within the cavern. Chapter 17. The unmasking of Eldoria's curse. The sound of weaving, a rhythmic click and whir, drew them deeper into the cavern, towards the source of the mysterious noise. The luminescent crystals cast a soft, ethereal glow, illuminating their path, guiding them toward something. They followed the sound, their hearts pounding with anticipation, their minds racing with possibilities. They reached a large, open area, in the center of which stood a massive loom, unlike any they had ever seen. The loom was crafted from shimmering crystal and polished wood, its intricate carvings depicting scenes of Eldoria, of the Wolf Guard, of Alaric and Briar. Threads of silver and gold, shimmering with magic, flowed from the loom, weaving a tapestry that seemed to stretch into infinity. And at the loom, seated on a simple stool, was a woman. She was ancient, her face lined with wisdom and sorrow, her eyes filled with a deep, knowing light. She was dressed in simple robes, woven from threads of starlight, her hands moving with a grace and precision that belied her age. She was the weaver of destinies, the guardian of the Shadowlands, the recorder of the past, the present, and the future. She looked up as they approached, her gaze meeting theirs, her eyes piercing, yet kind. She smiled, a gentle, welcoming smile. "Welcome, Alaric of Eldoria," she said, her voice soft and melodic, yet filled with power. "And welcome, Briar Vex, descendant of the Wolf Guard." Her words, her knowledge, confirmed their suspicions. They were in the presence of a being of immense power, of ancient wisdom, of magic. Alaric bowed, his movements respectful, his voice filled with awe. "Weaver," he said, "we seek your guidance. We seek a way back." The weaver nodded, her gaze lingering on the tapestry they had found, the tapestry depicting Eldoria's past. "Your destinies are intertwined," she said, "your paths woven together. You seek to break the curse, to reclaim your kingdom, to heal the wounds of the past." She gestured towards the tapestry she was weaving, the threads of silver and gold flowing from the loom. "The curse of Eldoria," she said, "is a complex tapestry woven from threads of betrayal, of ambition, of love." She paused, her gaze turning inward, as if searching the depths of time, the secrets of the past. "Lyra," she said, "she was not born evil. She was seduced by power, corrupted by darkness, driven by a broken heart." Briar and Alaric exchanged a glance, surprised by the weaver's words. Lyra a broken heart? It seemed impossible, preposterous, yet the weaver's words resonated with truth, with a deep, knowing understanding. "She loved you, Alaric," the weaver continued, her gaze meeting his, her eyes filled with compassion. "She loved you deeply, but her love was twisted, possessive, destructive." Alaric flinched, his face etched with pain, his golden eyes filled with guilt. He had spoken of Lyra's betrayal, of her ambition, of her cruelty. But he had never spoken of her love, of her broken heart. "She craved power," the weaver said. "She craved immortality. She saw you as a means to an end, a source of magic. She made a pact with dark forces, offering your soul, your kingdom, in exchange for eternal life." She paused, her gaze shifting to Briar. "But the curse had a weakness," she said. "A loophole, a chance for redemption. The power of love, of true love, could break the curse, could heal the wounds." She smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "And that, Briar Vex," she said, "is where you come in. Your love for Alaric, your connection to the Wolf Guard, your strength, your resilience, your magic, it is the key to breaking the curse, to freeing Eldoria, to restoring balance." Briar felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of awe, of gratitude, of love. She looked at Alaric, at his face, etched with pain and guilt, but also with a hint of hope, a spark of light. "The path back is not easy," the weaver warned. "Lyra, though weakened, still lingers. She will seek to stop you. She will use your fears, your doubts, your desires against you." She gestured towards a shimmering portal, forming beside the loom, a swirling vortex of light and energy. "This is your gateway," she said. "Your passage back to Eldoria. But be warned, the curse is not fully broken. It is weakened, but not destroyed." She reached into a fold of her shimmering robe and removed a small object, placing it on the massive loom. Lyra bound part of her life force, the weaver whispered, to an object. A vessel, and it must be destroyed to finally lift the curse. The object was a small, intricately carved wooden box. The box, the weaver spoke softly, is hidden within the deepest vault of Eldoria Castle, protected by ancient magic and Lyra's last remaining guardians. But it is there. She looked directly into Briar's eyes. "Only you, bonded to Alaric, can find it. Go now," the weaver said, her voice filled with a quiet urgency. "Your destiny awaits." The portal shimmered, beckoning. Chapter 18. The Reckoning of Lost Souls. The portal shimmered, a swirling vortex of light and energy, beckoning them back to Eldoria, back to the challenges that awaited them. Briar and Alaric exchanged a glance, their hearts filled with a mixture of trepidation and determination. They had come so far, endured so much, and now, they were on the verge of reclaiming their lives, their destinies, their love. Alaric took Briar's hand, his touch sending a familiar shiver through her, a surge of warmth that chased away some of her fear. "Ready?" he asked, his voice soft, his golden eyes filled with a quiet strength. Briar nodded, her hand tightening around his. "Ready," she replied, her voice firm, her eyes reflecting his determination. They stepped through the portal, the world dissolving around them into a chaotic swirl of colors and light. The sensation was familiar now, the feeling of being pulled apart and put back together, of being unmade and remade. But this time, there was a sense of purpose, of direction, of hope. They landed on solid ground, their bodies sprawled, their breath coming in ragged gasps. They were back in Eldoria Castle, in the ruined courtyard where their journey had begun. The crimson moon was gone, replaced by the pale light of dawn, casting long, ethereal shadows across the crumbling walls. But the castle was different. It was no longer silent, no longer empty. It was filled with a sense of anticipation, a feeling of awakening. The curse was weakened, the veil between worlds thinned, and the spirits of Eldoria, the lost souls who had been trapped for centuries, were stirring. As they rose to their feet, they saw them. Faint, shimmering forms, appearing and disappearing in the shadows, whispering voices carried on the wind. They were the spirits of Eldoria's past, the victims of Lyra's curse, the souls who had been trapped between worlds, seeking release. They were not hostile, not menacing. They were mournful, lost, seeking guidance. They recognized Alaric, their prince, their king, and they reached out to him, their voices whispering his name, their forms shimmering with hope. Alaric stood tall, his golden eyes filled with compassion and determination. He spoke to them, his voice strong and clear, his words echoing through the courtyard. "My people," he said, "I have returned. The curse it is weakening. We are close to breaking it, to freeing you, to restoring Eldoria." The spirits responded, their whispers growing louder, their forms more visible, their hope palpable. They surrounded Alaric, their presence a comforting embrace, a source of strength, a reminder of what he was fighting for. Briar watched, her heart filled with a mixture of awe and gratitude. She had helped to make this happen. She had played a part in this awakening. She was no longer just Briar Vex, the grieving widow, the lonely inhabitant of Blackwood Manor. She was a part of something larger, something extraordinary. She was a descendant of the Wolf Guard, a protector of Eldoria, a lover of a king. Alaric turned to her, his golden eyes shining with gratitude and love.
"We must find the box," he said.
"Lyra's vessel. We must destroy it." He knew the castle intimately, even after centuries of slumber. He led Briar through the crumbling corridors, the whispering halls, the haunted chambers. The spirits of Eldoria followed them, guiding them, protecting them, their presence a constant reminder of the stakes, of the price of failure. They reached the entrance to the deepest vault, a massive stone door, sealed with ancient magic, protected by guardians. As they approached, the guardians appeared shadowy figures, formed from darkness and malice, their eyes glowing with an eerie, red light. They were Lyra's last remaining protectors, remnants of her power, bound to the vault, sworn to defend it. They were formidable opponents, their movements swift and silent, their weapons deadly, their magic dark. But Alaric and Briar were ready. They fought, their skills honed by their experiences in the Shadowlands, their determination fueled by their love for each other, their commitment to Eldoria, their hope for the future. Alaric fought with his sword, his movements graceful and precise, his golden eyes blazing with defiance. Briar fought with her magic, her runes glowing with power, her wolf spirit simmering beneath the surface, ready to unleash. The spirits of Eldoria aided them, distracting the guardians, weakening their magic, their presence a constant source of strength. It was a fierce battle, a clash between darkness and light, between despair and hope, between past and future. But in the end, Alaric and Briar prevailed. They defeated the guardians, their shadowy forms dissolving into nothingness, their magic extinguished. They stood before the massive stone door, the entrance to the deepest vault, the hiding place of Lyra's vessel. They had overcome the guardians, but the door remained sealed, protected by ancient magic, a final barrier to their victory. Alaric reached out to touch the door, his hand glowing with the power of the old tongue. "Only you, Briar, bonded to me, can open this," he murmured, and stepped to the side. Briar's heart beat fast, but with a resolute breath she approached, touching the cool stone surface. She drew on everything, Alaric's love, her Wolfguard lineage, her own growing power, and whispered words from the old tongue. The door shuddered, and slowly began to open. Chapter 19. When silence speaks louder than words. The massive stone door groaned open, revealing a dark, circular chamber, the air thick with the scent of dust and decay. The only light came from the faint, ethereal glow of the runes carved into the walls, illuminating the chamber with an eerie, otherworldly radiance. In the center of the chamber, on a pedestal of black marble, sat the box. It was small, unassuming, crafted from dark wood, intricately carved with scenes of serpents and wolves. It was Lyra's vessel, the container of her remaining life force, the key to breaking the curse of Eldoria completely. Briar and Alaric stepped into the chamber, their footsteps echoing in the silence, their hearts pounding with anticipation and trepidation. They had come so far, endured so much, and now they were on the verge of achieving their goal, of freeing Eldoria, of reclaiming their lives. As they approached the pedestal, the air grew colder, the silence more profound, the runes on the walls glowing brighter, pulsating with energy. They could feel Lyra's presence, weak but persistent, a lingering echo of her power, her malice, her despair. Briar reached out, her hand trembling, her fingers hovering over the box. She hesitated, her mind filled with a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. This was it, the final act, the moment of truth. But what if she failed? What if she wasn't strong enough? Alaric placed his hand over hers, his touch warm and reassuring, his golden eyes filled with unwavering belief in her. "You can do this, Briar," he said, his voice soft, his words a gentle encouragement. "You're strong. You are ready." His words, his touch, his faith in her, gave her the strength she needed. She took a deep breath, steeling her resolve, focusing her mind. She closed her eyes, drawing upon her magic, upon her connection to Alaric, upon her love for him. She opened her eyes, her gaze fixed on the box, her hand reaching out, her fingers grasping the cold, smooth wood. She felt a surge of energy, a wave of darkness that pushed back against her, trying to repel her. It was Lyra's last stand, a desperate attempt to protect her vessel, to cling to her existence. Briar held on, her grip tightening, her body trembling with the effort. She spoke the words of the old tongue, the words of breaking, of unbinding, of destruction. The runes on the walls flared, their light blinding, their energy overwhelming. The chamber shook, the air crackling with power, the silence shattered by a deafening roar. The box it began to crack, to splinter, to dissolve. Lines of dark energy, like smoke, streamed from the breaking wood, dissipating into the air. Briar felt a sharp pain, a searing agony, as if a part of her own life force was being torn away. She cried out, her body convulsing, her mind reeling. Alaric held her, his arms wrapped around her, his body shielding her, his voice whispering words of comfort, of encouragement, of love. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The box was gone, reduced to dust, its magic extinguished, its power broken. Lyra's vessel was destroyed, her remaining life force dissipated, her curse lifted. The runes on the walls dimmed, their light returning to normal, their energy subsiding. The chamber grew quiet, the silence profound, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was a silence of peace, of release, of healing. Briar collapsed into Alaric's arms, exhausted, drained, but victorious. She had done it. She had broken the curse, freed Eldoria, saved Alaric. He held her close, his body trembling, his golden eyes filled with tears of relief, of gratitude, of love. He kissed her, a tender, passionate kiss, a seal of their victory, a promise of their future. They stood there in the silence, in the embrace, in the love, for a long, long time. Words were unnecessary, superfluous. Their hearts spoke to each other, their souls connected, their destinies intertwined. They had faced darkness, despair, and death. But they had emerged victorious, stronger, wiser, and more in love than ever before. They had found each other, in the midst of chaos, in the heart of a curse, in the depths of their souls. They had broken the chains of fate, forged their own destiny, created their own happily ever after. Slowly, they pulled apart and turned toward the open doorway together. The first rays of the true dawn were lighting the sky. The air was fresh and clean, and a chorus of voices, raised in joyous song, was echoing across the lands of Eldoria. Chapter 20. The Final Confrontation of Hearts. The joyous song of Eldoria's spirits, a chorus of voices celebrating their freedom, their release, filled the air, washing over Briar and Alaric like a wave of pure, unadulterated joy. They stepped out of the vault, hand in hand, into the dawn-lit courtyard, their hearts overflowing with gratitude, with relief, with love. The castle, once a symbol of darkness and despair, now seemed to shimmer with a renewed light, of vibrant energy, a sense of rebirth. The crumbling walls, the overgrown gardens, the haunted chambers, were slowly transforming, healing, coming back to life. The spirits of Eldoria swirled around them, their forms more visible now, their voices stronger, their gratitude palpable. They were no longer lost souls, trapped between worlds. They were free, restored, their spirits soaring, their voices joining in the chorus of celebration. Alaric raised his hand, his golden eyes shining with a mixture of pride and humility. He spoke to the spirits, his voice strong and clear, his words echoing through the courtyard. "My people," he said, "we have done it. The curse is broken. Eldoria is free." The spirits responded with a roar of approval, a joyous cry that shook the very foundations of the castle. They danced around Alaric and Briar, their forms shimmering with light, their voices raised in song, their gratitude overwhelming. Briar watched, her heart swelling with emotion, her eyes filling with tears of joy. She had played a part in this. She had helped to make this happen. She was no longer just Briar Vex, the grieving widow, the lonely inhabitant of Blackwood Manor. She was a heroine, a savior, a queen. Alaric turned to her, his golden eyes filled with a love that took her breath away. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "We did it, Briar," he said, his voice soft, his words a tender caress. Together. He leaned in and kissed her, a long, passionate kiss, a seal of their victory, a promise of their future, a testament to their love. The spirits swirled around them, their joyous song intensifying, their forms shimmering with light, their presence a blessing, a celebration of love and freedom. As they stood there, embraced in each other's arms, surrounded by the joyous spirits of Eldoria, Briar felt a sense of completion, a feeling of coming home. She had found her purpose, her destiny, her love. But their journey was not yet over. There were still challenges to face, wounds to heal, a kingdom to rebuild. Alaric pulled away slightly, his golden eyes searching hers, his gaze filled with a mixture of love and determination. "There is much to do, Briar," he said. "Eldoria needs us. We must rebuild, restore, create a new future." Briar nodded, her heart filled with a newfound sense of purpose, a determination to help Alaric, to serve Eldoria, to build a life together. "I know," she said, her voice firm, her eyes reflecting his determination. "And I'm ready. I'm with you. Always." They turned and walked, hand in hand, towards the castle, towards the rising sun, towards their future. The spirits of Eldoria followed them, their joyous song filling the air, their presence a constant reminder of their victory, of their love, of their freedom. As they walked, they began to plan, to dream, to envision a new Eldoria, a kingdom of peace, of prosperity, of magic. A place where love would triumph over hate, where hope would conquer despair, where light would always prevail over darkness. They would rebuild the castle, restore the gardens, revive the traditions. They would gather the remaining people of Eldoria, those who had survived the curse, those who had hidden in the shadows, those who had waited for this day. They would create a new council, a governing body of wise and just leaders who would guide Eldoria into a new era of peace and prosperity. They would honor the past, remember the lost souls, celebrate the survivors. But they would also look to the future, embrace change, create a better world. And, most importantly, they would rule together, as king and queen, their love a beacon of hope, a symbol of unity, a testament to the power of connection. Their final confrontation was not with a villain or a monster, but with their own hearts. They had to decide, once and for all, what their future held. And with one shared look, they knew. As they entered the castle, hand in hand, their steps echoing through the halls, their hearts filled with love and hope, they knew that their journey had just begun. Their final confrontation was over. Their true life, together, was just starting. The song of Eldoria's spirit swelled, a triumphant anthem, as the sun rose fully, bathing the land in a golden, glorious light. Epilogue. Years passed, flowing like a gentle stream, carving a path of peace and prosperity through the once cursed lands of Eldoria. The castle, rebuilt stone by stone, stood proud and majestic, a beacon of hope against the azure sky. The gardens, once overgrown and choked with weeds, now bloomed with vibrant life, a riot of color and fragrance that filled the air with a sweet, intoxicating perfume. Briar and Alaric, hand in hand, walked through those gardens, their steps slower now, their hair streaked with silver. But their love remained as strong and vibrant as the day they had broken the curse, as radiant as the Eldorian sun that warmed their faces. They had ruled wisely and justly, their reign a testament to the power of love, of unity, of second chances. Eldoria had flourished under their guidance, its people thriving, its magic restored, its spirit unbroken. They had faced challenges, of course. The wounds of the past were deep, the scars slow to heal. There were whispers of dissent, echoes of old rivalries, remnants of Lyra's dark influence. But they had overcome them all, together, their love a shield against the darkness, their wisdom a guiding light. They had welcomed Mrs. Hawthorne to Eldoria, the faithful housekeeper becoming a cherished member of their court, her clucking and fussing a comforting constant in their lives. She had, at first, been bewildered by the magic, by the spirits, by everything. But she had adapted, as she always did, her practicality and her loyalty unwavering. The spirits of Eldoria, once lost and mournful, now danced freely through the castle and its grounds, their joyous song a constant reminder of the victory they had won, of the freedom they had earned. Briar, once the grieving widow, the lonely inhabitant of Blackwood Manor, had blossomed into a queen, a sorceress, a wife. Her magic had grown stronger, her confidence unwavering. She had embraced her heritage, her lineage as a descendant of the Wolf Guard, her ability to transform a secret she shared only with Alaric. Alaric, once the cursed prince, the sleeping sorcerer, had found redemption, freedom, and love. He had shed the weight of centuries, the burden of his past, the guilt of his betrayal. He had become the king he was always meant to be, wise, just, and compassionate. They often walked to the cliffs, overlooking the sea, where their journey had begun. They would stand there, hand in hand, watching the waves crash against the rocks, remembering the storm, the fear, the awakening. They would remember the Shadowlands, the Weaver, the Serpent, the Wolf. They would remember the sacrifices they had made, the challenges they had overcome, the love they had found. And they would be grateful. Grateful for their second chance, grateful for their love, grateful for Eldoria. One evening, as the sun set, casting a fiery glow over the sea, they stood on the cliffs, their arms wrapped around each other, their hearts filled with a profound sense of peace. "It's beautiful," Briar whispered, her voice filled with awe. Alaric nodded, his golden eyes reflecting the setting sun, his gaze filled with a love that transcended time, that defied death, that endured. "It is," he agreed, his voice soft, "but not as beautiful as you." He leaned in and kissed her, a tender, gentle kiss, a testament to their enduring love, a promise of their forever. As they stood there, embraced in each other's arms, beneath the starry sky, the spirits of Eldoria danced around them, their joyous song filling the air, their presence a blessing, a celebration of love, of life, of eternity. And in that moment, Briar knew that she had found her true home, her true purpose, her true love. She was no longer lost, no longer alone, no longer incomplete. She was Briar Vex, Queen of Eldoria, wife of Alaric, descendant of the Wolf Guard, protector of the realm, and lover of a king. She was home, and she was happy. The final rays of the setting sun bathed them in a warm, golden light, and a gentle breeze whispered through the air, carrying with it the scent of roses, of sea salt, and of magic. The end.